Welcome. Welcome to Lesson 4 of PADM 404, Intelligence Sharing. I want to just start off with a quick paper review. I've gotten a lot of questions about this because I've written about analysis in these short papers. What I'm looking for, again, is not just for you to rehash what it says in the readings for whatever initiative or anything comes up. I want you to actually, in your intro paragraph, and most of you, as the format says, use an intro paragraph, 3 to 4 sentences, analysis that says, okay, this is the initiative, this is the problem it solves, this is the backdrop of why we implemented it, and this is what gap it fills. Those are the types of intro sentences that will capture your reader as you go through these papers. Again, if you're just giving information, the Wikipedia version of why we have Stone Garden or Urban Area Security Initiative, then you're really shortchanging the reader, and the reader is going to get turned off by that. So that's why I kind of want analysis in these papers coming up. And then for the final paper, which I'll talk about in a second, I really want you to dig into analysis. I do not want it's a separate entity than these information papers that you've so far done. Current events. The one thing I will say about current events, I don't want to get too political here, but something that's come up in the last week is publicizing terrorist acts. And this was brought up by the Trump administration that certain acts don't get publicized as what I presume the administration wants them to be. And that was part of the debate. What I think the debate missed is much of terrorism is publicity. That is the point of terrorism. Whether you want to publicize for your cause, for some of these group terrorisms, or whether if you're an individual like the Fort Hood shooter or the Orlando shooter that still has mental issues, but they still seek that publicity, that's one of their goals. I have a theory, and I don't know how to test this, but I have a theory that if no terrorist actions were given publicity, there would be no terrorism. I have that theory. I do not believe terrorism is about brutality. It's about a sick way to garner attention to yourself or to your cause. And if the media did not publicize it, did not give attention to this, these acts of terrorism would go away. So that's just something to think about. Again, when you see terrorism or when you hear about causes of terrorism or what influences of terrorism, I believe that's true. And even though the beheadings that we've seen by ISIS, we call them brutal, but they're honestly clickbait, for lack of a better term. A brutal way, the analogy is like a celebrity showing their butt on TV. And I don't mean to make light of it, but it's just a brutal way of doing that to get publicity to oneself. And that, I believe, is a cornerstone of terrorism. And if you disagree with me, feel free to share that. But I think was brought up in this last debate or debate that we've had this past week. I also want to say, if you guys have TVs and you watch PBS, excellent documentary on Tim McVeigh, Oklahoma City bombing that occurred in 1995, and many of you might be too young to remember that, but if you want to watch that, it's a very excellent documentary that I saw on PBS. So lesson 3 review, HSGP. I just want to emphasize that you need to master this concept for the final paper. So make sure you understand all the components of the HSGP, and then we're going to apply risk and we're going to apply methodologies to it so you can expand it a little bit more. But you have to understand this baseline with as much thoroughness as possible. The 3 components, again, the original grant program, the original grant program, and then the Urban Area Security Initiative, as many of you mentioned, to try and apply dollars to population centers where there's more risk. And again, terrorism is more likely to occur in urban areas, LA, Washington, than it is maybe in some of the really remote rural areas. And then Stone Garden, again, was emphasis the border areas, that it didn't cover the risk assessment because it was low population, low threat of there being an attack on the border, but you need money to secure the border so that terrorists can't infiltrate in. So make sure you understand that logic and that pyramid as we go forth. And the one thing we can have debates on is is the Homeland Security grant program and the grants given to municipalities, is it the most efficient spending out there? Is it we get to a point where communities have MRAPs. Do they really need that? I mean, we could talk about militarization of the police, but we also talk about, is that an efficient way of spending it? When we have coded communications, does Wichita, Kansas police force need coded communications? Do they need flak vests for their canine crews? I mean, this is how the problem comes up, is, again, these rural areas get more advanced armor equipment while cities don't have even basic communication systems. So again, when you're looking at Homeland Security grant program, think about these disparities that happen. And then I'm going to attach a YouTube to this as well that shows you what I'm looking for the final paper, so you can get ahead of it. We've got a few weeks here of spring break and reading period and such. So if you want to go ahead and start thinking about the paper, here's a YouTube, or in this email there'll be a YouTube for that. And then lesson 4 preview, intelligence sharing. Now, a lot of the issues that we talked about in the first week about 9/11, what were the causes of 9/11, is our intelligence community reformed so we don't have another 9/11? Those issues will come up in this week. And then one of the things that we touch on is watch listing functions. We have these federal level watch lists, no-fly lists, selectee lists. Are we getting that pushed down so Joe police officer knows if there's a terrorist in his or her neighborhood, or someone on a watch list in his or her neighborhood? That's a big part of intelligence sharing environment that we're going to cover in lesson 4. Fusion centers, we'll touch on that as well. We've spent billions of dollars on these fusion centers. More than 50 of them are in the United States, and these are meant to be intelligence sharing between, or close the gap between federal, state, local levels, so that information can get shared up and down the chains of command. A lot of people say it's a worthwhile investment. Others will say, we have FBI, we have Joint Terrorism Task Force. These are just redundancies, and we just wasted a couple of $1 billion. You tell me, and that's something to think about if you think the fusion centers are effective. And then one of the things that we're going to talk about in the discussion section, private sector sharing. That is a big issue, especially when we're talking cyber issues, cyber intelligence issues from a Homeland Security perspective. First of all, there's a couple of components for this. One, much of the critical infrastructure, power, dams, those types of issues are privately owned. Can the government mandate that those industries follow these protocols because we've determined that they're critical infrastructure? I mean, yes, we do that for other industries, but again, unlike when you get your cyber training, if you're a Department of Defense employee, you would have to make special protocols for the private sector. You'd have to put mandates, and they would have to pay for that, or who would pay for it? That would be the question when, again, you're securing critical infrastructure that's privately owned. The other piece of this is information sharing. And again, we've talked about information sharing between agencies, how difficult that is. And one of the problems is sometimes agencies want to keep information because they don't want to, they see information as power. Well, that's triply, quadruply true for the private sector. If Home Depot gets their cyber systems breached by a foreign power, they don't want to reveal that. They don't want to tell the world that their credit information is undermined, and it undermines their brand, it undermines their customer relationships. But again, if you want to find out, if you want to catch the people, the groups behind the people conducting cyber hacking or even cyber attacks, Home Depot has to share their information with Target, which has to share their information with Staples or whoever gets breached next. So they have to share information among their competitors. And again, that brings up business practice issues that you don't have if it's just a government entity just sharing information. So a lot to think about for intelligence sharing. Again, your paper will cover the D&I function, and your discussion will cover some of these issues with sharing with the private sector. So if there's any questions or issues, again, feel free to let me know. And again, I look forward to seeing your discussion boards, and have a good break. I know we have spring break and a reading period, so we've got some time to catch up. And I should have your papers marked sometime during that break as well. And if there's questions or issues, please let me know.